So I need to do my intro first. So
No, your shit stuck together, see?
it's not. If you had given me the blue tack, then it would have stuck together. But I use sellotape. You don't know, Tammy. You don't. No.
You can't move it.
Don't tell me what to do. Hi guys, and welcome back to TashTalk, where we have real conversations on life and creativity. Now, today's guest has a very special place in my heart and a persistent pain in my neck. It is every person's favorite dentist, Dr. Shaikho. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Yes,
How are you?
I'm surviving the times. Thank you for coming on. Not that I forced you, but I think you have a very particular perspective that I want to shed light on, and where you are kind of starting your content creation journey, which is completely different from most dentists, in my opinion. I thought, why not bring him onto the podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Good. I'm glad. So obviously this is going to be slightly different because a lot of my guests are like creatives. I personally think you're still a creative in my opinion. I still think you're creative.
Yeah.
You know, not to say that you're not a dentist, but I see the creative side of you that I don't see in many other like professionals. And so I thought, bring you
There's a lot
on.
of creativity in dentistry, to be fair, but I guess patients probably do it. It's not one of the traditional creative industries by any means, at healthcare at the end of the day, but there is.
In what way?
Well, I think when you get into the content creation side of things and you want to start designing your brand's logo and branding, I think branding and marketing is completely creative. But yeah, it's about how much of that you want to do. And not every dentist is going to want to do that. Some dentists just want to do the bread and butter dentistry, and that's absolutely fine. But when you do start making decisions and thinking about your own personal brand, then it does get a little bit creative. So you do have to have a little bit of input there.
Yeah, I was going to say most dentists that I've seen at least don't take the time to, dive into their branding, and because like you say, most of them are just about their bread and butter. At least from what I've seen, you're way more privy than I am. But I want to take us all the way back prior to dentistry. I want to talk about your early life and essentially what led you from being a young little boy to then essentially becoming the dentist that you are today. As people might not be aware, obviously you wasn't born in this country. So what was it like coming from Syria to the UK? Were there any significant cultural shifts that you was like, whoa?
Yes, there was quite a few actually. It was quite a unique time in history when I came to the UK because the UK was still like welcoming migrants, and at least from what I remember, it felt like a much more welcoming environment than it feels now. I think since 2016 and Brexit happened, there's a lot more anti-immigrant rhetoric like out in public and just in general media at the moment. But it was really nice back then. It felt like everyone was really welcoming. I was actually one of the first batch of refugees to go up north, like to be taken out of London and to be put in Huddersfield, like West Yorkshire. At least Syrians anyway, sorry, not just general refugees. I'm sure there were refugees there before. But Syrian refugees, we were the first family of Syrian Kurdish refugees to be in West Yorkshire.
Right. So what year was this?
This was 2000.
Okay. It was a different time entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with time, it slowly started to, especially after the Iraq War and the UK's invasion of Iraq, the vibe changed a little bit, and you definitely sense that. Especially as a young kid walking home from school, you'd get like little comments here and there, and you'd notice that, I'm actually quite different, and this wasn't like the warm, friendly environment I was welcome to just 3 years ago.
So you saw a shift within like 3 years?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because obviously 2001 and obviously 9/11 and whatnot. That's interesting. Was there anything that surprised you? In a good way?
Yes, I think people's willingness to help surprised me, which I think is really interesting. At a time where the economy was really good, you can sense that more people are willing to help and they're more welcoming of immigrants. And then as things started to get worse, it seemed as though people needed a scapegoat at that point, and immigrants kind of became the source of the finger pointing.
Yeah. So you mentioned people being welcoming and how willing they are to help. Did you see a difference in how people were willing to help in London versus when you went up north to Huddersfield?
I wasn't in London very long.
I see.
But up north, it was really friendly. People were so nice. And I still think to this day up north, like people are much friendlier than they are in London.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, having been up north and been outside of London and having grown up in London all my life, my understanding of where I live and where I'm from is that you can not know your neighbours. Whereas I've been to other places in the UK, especially up north, and I mean close to Wales, like near Bristol and stuff, where like you see someone in the street, it's hello, whereas in in London, if you say hello to someone you don't know,
Yeah, it's weird.
it's like what, you know? And so when I go outside of London, sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to almost like climatize into that social construct. You know, I think, I don't know, personally, I think it's a blessing. I think that's the way it should be. But I think where London is kind of like, it breeds this individualistic mentality. And so, you know, you can walk past your neighbor and not say hi.
It's true. No, absolutely. I think recently I went up north and I found that I was stood in a sandwich shop waiting for a sandwich, and this guy kept looking at me. He was like, "Hi, you all right?" And I thought, "What's his problem? Like, why is he asking me if I'm all right? Like, do I look like
right.
I'm?" Yeah, that's the kind of
You're
vibe that I was getting.
Like,
But I forgot that maybe I've just been in London for too long. Like, people do actually ask, "How's it going? You okay?"
yeah.
Up north, whereas down south, if someone says to me, "Are you all right?" I'm like, "Is there an issue? Have I done
We got
something
to
wrong?"
fight now. What is it?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's sad. Obviously, I'm from where I'm from, and you know, there's parts of it that I love. But that is one thing that I wish I would change, that I could change about London, is that it's almost like everyone's here, but there's no community. You know, and so you feel like you're amongst everything and everyone, and yet you still feel so isolated.
Yeah, I think in London you definitely have to take more responsibility for the community that you create for yourself. Like, it's not a given, and I think that's just the nature of a capital city and the people's travel habits or people's living arrangements. People come and go out of London regularly, so it's hard to find someone, especially in a place where the renting market is so dynamic and it's always changing. You're going to have that where people are not going to stay put in one area, so you never really get the chance to build that relationship with them.
Yeah, I feel you, and I've experienced that firsthand. Like, not only living in council housing, and you know, you can get to know your neighbours for like, you know, 5 years, sometimes even 10 plus years, and then you know they're shafted off somewhere else, and then you never hear from them again. You know, and it's like probably less so now because of social media and the internet and being able to communicate. But like prior to that, there's people that I've grown up with, and I don't have a clue where they are. You know, like best friends that literally from I was knee high and now, you know, just through, I guess, displacement. So what were like your earliest aspirations?
My earliest aspirations would have to be, obviously, I was like a little gay kid. I liked fashion. I liked music. I liked pop stars. I had like a brief stint with like archaeology and like being fascinated by ancient Egypt and the pharaohs and the mummies and stuff like that. I found that all really fascinating. But yeah, from a very young age, I was like, okay, I really want to design clothes. I want to be a fashion designer when I'm older. And I want people to look good and feel. And my uncle was a fashion designer at the time as well, so I took a lot of inspiration from him. And I was really good at drawing, and my dad was an architect and he drew. So me and my dad would always spend a lot of time together. He would like get me the pens and paper. We'd just sit there all afternoon on a weekend just drawing together and painting and stuff. It was nice. Yeah,
and I've seen that firsthand. You know, like not only are you great as a dentist, you have all these side talents. You know, drawing. I guess you're a seamstress as well. You know how to run a sewing machine. Things that I really wish that I'd kind of dived into a lot more. Like obviously I grew up drawing, doing art and whatnot. I did it as a GCSE, and then obviously as I pursued more performing arts, the kind of like literal art kind of like took a back seat. But it almost seems like, yeah, even though you don't necessarily engage in it as much, you've managed to retain the talent itself, you know, which is tough.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think it is one of those things, like it's easy for me to say. I think it's just the hours that you put into it. I think like with anything, I just spent ages just drawing and painting and that occupied so much of my life. Like it was a weird day if there weren't loads of pens and like papers out on our living room table. And my mum was like, oh, let's shuffle all these away. And my dad's just like chilled out there with his pens and like sketching a building or drawing a Kurdish woman feeding a horse or, you know, just some random stuff. So, yeah.
I mean, it runs in your family. Like it runs in your family. I've seen some of the work that people in your family produce, and not work as in like, oh, they've done this, but like just on a casual flex. Like can't remember if it was your cousin, like not even that old, and he drew something, and I was just like, whoa. It's like, whoa. And then also seeing your cousin's sister as well, like your other cousin, like again, the other day, saw her draw something. I was like, whoa. You know, I kind of wish that I was that good at that age, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I think a lot of that has to do with my dad and the career he pursued. and him being the first person to go to university and get university education, and that education being architecture, which was a very creative, respected profession. So his drawing. So on my dad's side of the family, that talent was always a prized talent. And he was the first one to kind of do it and become quote unquote successful, like have a professional job that makes good money and be able to help out your dad and your family when they need something because you're the one professional in the family that can. So they did always put drawing on a pedestal. So if someone in my family can draw, it's like, wow, he's going to do something great.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I spoke to Cassie and Chippo, who were on the podcast before you, and I asked them a very similar question in terms of like, what was their growing up environment like that allowed them to, to engage in these things? Because in some households, in a lot of households, it's not seen as a realistic choice, like a realistic career path, to be able to, he's going to draw for a living. But yes, I get why some parents might think my child is not going to grow up drawing for a living, but I think when you understand how those skills and talents can be channeled into something like architecture, then it then begins to make sense, and it seems like your dad and your dad's side of the family kind of just understood that. And so at what point did you decide that you wanted to be a dentist?
Honestly, it was when I started becoming more aware of my sexuality. It became a thing of what is guaranteed stability. And obviously looking back now, there's no guaranteed stability in anything.
Yeah.
But as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, you're looking around like, okay, what am I good at? And you're kind of making things that I'm good at, things that I'm not good at, what I want to do, what I don't want to do. And what can I make money from? Because money was at the top of that list. And, people have these misconceptions about, how dentists are living. And a lot of that was actually to do with my mum because she was an interpreter at the time. So she would go from like dental practice to GP surgery to midwife appointment and translate for all these Kurdish people that had just arrived to the UK, like fleeing wars and stuff. And she would have these relationships with like medical professionals and the people that she's attending these appointments, just like lawyers, and sometimes it'll be the police and stuff like that. So she was kind of in the...
She was privy. She was in
exactly. She was seeing what... She's funny as well. She was like, this person drives this car and this person's doing this. If you want to make money, then you need to do this. And when it came up to like, what do you want to do when you're older? She was like, Shaikho or Judy. Because when I was growing up, they used to call me Judy. They were like, we know you. You have a taste for money. You like nice things. Because even from a young age, I would ask for like really ridiculous things
like
that
what
my mum couldn't afford.
Like what?
Bless her, like she had 3 kids and my dad wasn't working at the time and she was the only one that was working. And I'd be like, I want the most expensive games console.
As any kid would, I guess.
But in my head, it made it seem like I was demanding, like I really wanted a lot of things. Because my family came from Syria where people just got what they were given. And I came and I was in the middle of having British expectations for my birthday, but coming from Syria to where a birthday was like you meet up with family, you sit together, you have some cake, and that's that. There's no like big, it's your day and you can have a wish list of things that you want and everyone's going to bring you a gift. So it was kind of balancing the two lives of my expectations, having seen what my friends are getting and what the people, my peers at school were getting and what my mum grew up with as the norm, and her seeing that actually you're asking for a lot. And in my head, I was like, I'm actually not asking for that much at all compared to...
Because what's her face down the street is
exactly.
getting... It's one of those things that people tend to overlook, like those cultural shifts in terms of expectations, especially as a child where you're not as privy and not as conscious about, how your expectations are being received and perceived by your mum, So she's just seeing you doing what every other British kid is doing and then seeing, he clearly likes nice things. And then, I guess in turn... directing you down a path, or at least suggesting a path that will give you what she thought you wanted, when in reality you just wanted you were just a product of your environment. You feel me? Like you're in the UK now, you get me, where there's money.
Exactly.
Apparently.
This was it. And aside from like them thinking that I want nice things, it was an element of, becoming sexually aware of yourself and being like, okay, I'm gay. I come from a more traditional family that it wasn't like a massive... It was more of a taboo than it was forbidden, because we have family members that are gay, and people still spoke to them, and it wasn't like like, oh, we're not going to talk to you if you're gay, but it was like all under wraps. There's nothing out about it.
And it was a different time as well. Like it's not today, like 2024, well 2025 now, raw. But you know, it's
2007, 2008, like when you're in I was in year 8 trying to decide what I'm going to do for my GCSEs. And once you're kind of picking your GCSEs, in my family anyway, it was like, okay, you need to be aware that what you're picking now is going to limit what you can apply for at college, and what you apply for at college is going to limit what you can apply for at uni, because if you don't do triple science, like if you do it at year 9, you know that you want to be a dentist, and as a result, pick triple science, that means at GCSE, you're not A level, you're not going to be able to apply to sit A level chemistry and A level biology. And if you don't do that, then dentistry is not an option.
So it's like the seed is planted from early, or rather like the decision, if you're going to make that decision at 24, 25, then the seed needs to be planted at age 14, which sounds stressful.
It was a heavy decision.
And so how much of it was weighted, or how much of it was influenced by the feeling of your need for security being gay, and how much of it was like external, i.e. your parents or family?
I think the two are linked. I don't think you can detach the two, because you will feel secure if you have the support of your family. Yeah, I think it's a 50-50 kind of thing, and I don't think you can really detach the two.
Yeah,
because if I felt secure and, you know, supported, then
you wouldn't have. Yeah, you might not necessarily have made that decision to find a security elsewhere.
Yeah,
interesting.
Exactly. Like I wouldn't feel like, oh, I need to make enough money to support myself, because there's no way that my family are ever going to support me. So it's kind of like you're making big decisions based on assumptions about the people around you. And I'm not saying I regret it. I absolutely,
of course,
I love what I do. But I know what my mindset was at 14 and where that was kind of coming from. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. What was that coming out situation like?
That wasn't good.
I mean, we could share stories, because mine, we could exchange. Did I tell you? Have you told you mine? I told you mine.
I don't remember. I don't think you have.
Okay, well, you can share yours, and then I'll share mine.
Basically, I was in Rome.
Bonding.
Me and my sister went out. Yeah. And we came back, and we met 2 guys on a night out. They kind of showed us around. They were like, oh, there's this really good bar here. There's this bar here. And the guy was like saying to my sister, oh, your brother's so handsome. This and that. And then him and his friend took us to this one club. He paid us in, was like paying for our drinks all night, which was really nice. But then the end of the night came, he was like, oh, my friend's gone home and I've got nowhere to stay. He's like, do you mind if I stay with you guys for tonight? And then he came back to ours. Obviously, my sister was married at that point, so it would be inappropriate for a man to sleep in her bed. So, and there was no other bed, so he slept in my bed. And then my mum walked in on us in the morning in the same bed. And it was all just...
And so, did she walk in on you doing something?
No.
Okay.
It was more like just like...
Seeing... just spinning what's happening.
Just like sleeping, basically.
It was enough to know you are gay.
Yeah.
Why are you gay?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So, how was the reaction after that? Like, did all hell break loose? Did the fears that you was worried about initially that made you decide to go into dentistry, did they come to fruition?
Yes. Yes, they did. Because she was a bit frustrated. Well, a bit. She was really frustrated at first.
Yeah.
But thankfully, at that point, I was in my 3rd year of dentistry. I'd made loads of friends that knew who I was as a person, about my sexuality, and they loved me regardless of it. And I'd come to an acceptance within myself that was like, if you're going to love me with conditions, then I don't want that love.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm at university now. I've got a student loan. I've got student finance. I work 2 jobs as well at university. And there's a path for me after this. So that if you're not willing to support me, I completely appreciate that. But you're not kind of taking into account the years that I've gone through carrying this. Yeah. And you're making it all about you.
Yeah.
And when she kind of saw my perspective, she saw that no one chooses this. No one chooses to have a more difficult life. Who would want to be gay?
Who would want to like men?
No. Who would want to like, when you look at the gay community, they are, let me not talk too much, it's fine.
I mean, I'll happily speak on it because I've been in it. You feel me? And especially being in London, I've seen the trauma. I've been a part of the trauma. I've circled around the trauma. I've had to pull myself away from the trauma because I see myself and I see our experiences in so many of our peers, so many of our queer peers. You feel me? Who have similar situations where they either fear or they genuinely are in danger of being ostracized by their families or you know, being disowned in some cases, and in some cases, which is significantly worse than yours, is like you say, where it's completely forbidden, not necessarily taboo, but like you can be murdered on a sly. You feel me? And so I see how carrying all of that for so many years, especially through like teenage years as well into adulthood, I see it, and that kind of influenced part of my decision to come out to my mum as well because. Well, there was one significant thing happened. One of my best friends' mum died randomly, out of nowhere. I was on the way to the club with another one of our friends, a mutual that we had. And I can't remember whether it was a text or a phone call when he called me. He was like, Tash, regardless, the message that I got was that my mum passed. So obviously we're on our way to the club, bearing in mind. So like the whole energy just completely shifted now. So I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? He told me, he was like, bruv, I just walked into the room and she's gone. You feel me? And so the whole time we was in the club, ironically, we was there because my friend who was on X Factor had to go there for an appearance. So we wasn't going there for recreation. It was work, really. He had to be there, you get me, and show face. The whole time we were there, couldn't really enjoy it because obviously we just got that news. Did what we had to do, smile for the cameras. When we left, I went home and I think I expected my mum to be there. My mum wasn't there when I got home. I think she had went out as well. So I kind of stayed up. And then when she came into my room, I was like, Mum, I need to speak to you. She was like, give me 2 seconds. I need to go to the toilet. She just come in from going out. And then she came back in and yeah, I just kind of just told her. And I said to her, I was like, part of the reason why I'm telling you is because my friend's mum just died out of nowhere. And I would hate in my heart to know that I was carrying something and not be honest with you, you know, as and when that time may come, you know, ideally not anytime soon in it. But yeah, that kind of gave me that impetus to do it. But if that situation hadn't happened, it might have taken me even longer to come out, you know, because there's a weight, as you've shared. There's a weight. Now that your family's come to terms with it and you know you're at an element of peace with it, is there anything you would change about your decision to become a dentist? Real conversations on life and creativity. Be honest. You can be honest.
Do you know what? Yes. Absolutely.
Go on.
Absolutely. I think as much as I love dentistry, it's a very, very difficult job. I think we work extremely hard and people just see one aspect of it. They think that it's all, have a quick look around the mouth, do a checkup, and then on your way off you pop. They don't see everything that comes after that or before that, or the amount of years of training that you've put into becoming a dentist, the expectations of you, the payment structure, how the NHS works, how private dentistry works, the tax associated with everything. So a part of me is like, would I do it again? I mean, shoulda, woulda, coulda, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Would I have done it again? I do love doing it now. But if you told a 15, 16-year-old me that, by the way, do you know that your parents don't actually care? Who knows what I would have done at that point?
Yeah.
But I think as a dentist, you'd be lying if at some point in your dental career you weren't like, is this for me?
Like with any career, with most careers.
Every dentist in dental school, I feel like once a year, in 1 year of the 5 that you're studying to be a dentist.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years.
There'll be like a few students that are like, oh, I think I'm just going to drop out at this point. Like, I can't do it. And so a lot of them did.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Like, a few of them dropped out in the first year and then the second year, sometimes even in the third year. And you're like, oh my God, we're 2 years away. Why are you doing this right now? Like, why did you sit all those these second year exams were hell. And you know what? It's kind of like one of those things that you see people doing, oh, well, I've already given this many years to it now. And you kind of keep giving, just keep giving with the hope that it's going to get easier and it's going to get better once you get to this place. And you're like, okay, just a little bit more.
Keep on going.
It doesn't get easier. It does not get easier. Sorry.
So it doesn't get easier even post graduating.
No. It gets harder post-graduation.
Because then responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on you.
Yeah.
And you're not in school anymore. You're not a baby no more. No one to hold your hand. It's literally just you.
Yeah, there's no guide. Well, there can be, depending on your journey and who you kind of meet along the way. But me being in London, there was no kind of like mentor available to me. There was no one that I looked up to in dentistry that was prepared to take me on as a mentor.
Yeah.
The people that I looked up to were really sweet, but they weren't. I wouldn't want their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were really, really nice people and really, kind, caring. But did I want what they had? No. And the people that had what I wanted were too busy to take on like a mentor and be like, oh, I'm going to teach you the ways. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to show you that. Like, for what?
Because they're busy having what you want.
Yeah.
So it's tough. When did you graduate? What year?
2019.
2019. And so you graduated just before COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that like practicing during COVID? Not only graduating pretty much pre-COVID, but then also practicing during COVID. Because I think a lot of people tend to forget that dentists are healthcare workers, and you guys were equally on the front line, you know, working while everyone else was getting claps. Not that you guys should have got claps, because I don't think anyone should have got claps. They should have got what they deserved, and that was a pay rise, you know. But what was that like for you?
It was intense. It was really difficult. There was a lot of things to grapple with. So that was during my foundation year where you're like salaried. So thankfully, just until the end of August, I was salaried. So this was 2020.
Okay.
When I finished my foundation year, until August, I was salaried. And then it was like, you're in London, you've got rent to pay. There's no job. You're applying at loads of different practices. Obviously, all the practices have reduced capacity because I think they were just seeing emergencies at that point. So you this is like during a time where you weren't even allowed to leave the house.
Yeah.
Unless it was for urgent things, or like they would say you could do a walk a day or something like that.
Exercise.
But yeah, I had rent to pay and I was working in this one practice. I absolutely hated it. Just doing urgent dental care day in day, like extraction or start a root canal or just to get people out of pain, basically prescribe antibiotics. Between each patient, you were like wearing this big space helmet and gowns and gloves and sweating like you've never seen before. It was hellish.
And that's the thing. I don't know any of that. And of course, because we've come so far out of COVID, which wasn't even that long ago when I think about it, but because I've somewhat forgotten the extent of how bad it was. And your story is not the side that we see. We only saw the people working in A&E. We saw the people working in hospitals. We barely even saw the GP side of things. You get me? The idea of like you guys up in hazmats and like it was tense.
It's because it's aerosol. So whenever you run a drill in the mouth, that water is getting in contact with their saliva, which is the source. If you have COVID, then it's going to be in your saliva or you cough it up. And that water's kind of going up into the atmosphere. And at that point, they'd done research. Well, there wasn't that much known about it, but they'd established that it's transmissible by saliva. And obviously with dentistry, there's a lot of saliva in there. Saliva is involved. So every time that aerosol goes up into the atmosphere, you have to let it settle once a patient leaves and wipe the whole area down. So we had to leave like 15 minutes between each patient, which obviously slowed everything down. Because if you think about your NHS checkup, you go in there, you're in there for 10 minutes, then you're back out again, the next one's in.
Yeah.
So it reduced the capacity of dentistry back to like a quarter of what it was. Because instead of being 1 in, 1 out, you're kind of 1 in, do the checkup, leave it 15 minutes, wipe the surfaces and everything, next one in, and kind of repeat. And then sometimes you have to do a treatment as well in that appointment. If they've been in severe pain, they haven't been able to sleep for 3 nights, big swollen face, you're having to drill out the tooth and say to them, look, I can start this treatment to get you out of pain, but we're just an urgent dental care centre, so we can't complete the treatment here. We can just get you out of pain. Yeah, really intense. And then managing people's expectations. So sometimes people would come in and be like, oh, well, I don't want to do this treatment, or I don't want this. And it's like,
look around, look what's happening.
So yeah, sometimes I do wish that I'd gone into something that didn't require as much back and forth with people, which I probably should have thought of before I applied to dentistry, because there's a lot of talking to people. But when you're young, you're like, still, I feel like I'm quite a chatty patty, to be fair. I do like talking to people.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to like their health, there are things that as a dentist, I know what is good for you. And I just have to tell you the risks and benefits. But in the UK, the culture of healthcare is so different to a lot of other countries, where patients are a lot more empowered, which is good. As a patient, you want to be empowered to kind of share your view and ask, make yourself aware of every possible option.
Yeah.
But it takes time to kind of explain every single possibility or every single risk and benefit to a patient to ensure that they're well consented for a treatment.
Yeah.
And when the patient makes the wrong decision, what you think is the wrong decision, you have to make sure, do you really understand what you're saying right now? Because if things go wrong, they can turn around, oh, I didn't understand that. You didn't tell me this.
Yeah.
So then, especially as a young dentist, when you first come out of uni and you're like, oh my God, they tell you at uni so many times, oh, you're going to be sued for this, you're going to be sued for that. So you're so defensive that you're like, I need to make sure that you completely understand.
Yeah.
And a form just doesn't make the cut anymore. You have to really ensure understanding, which is a whole talk in and of itself. Like, what is consent and how do you ensure consent and how do you protect yourself in the culture of litigation that we live in? But yeah, it was a really stressful time, that period.
I could imagine. And even, I don't think that's exclusive to that time because, like you say, even till this day, you still have to make sure that the patients that you see are completely understanding of what it is you're recommending and what you're about to do, with their consent. And so, yeah, I'm starting to understand even more so, yeah, just how constant the weight is of the career path that you've picked, you feel me? Which, again, like, some of the things that you've shared aren't exclusive to your career path. There are many times in my own career where I've been like, is this for me? And I'm sure there's other people who in different career paths are like, So I think it's natural. But again, I'm glad we're having this conversation because it sheds a light on what people think is quite like a face value role. It's kind of like, oh, he's a dentist, What are people's perceptions, or have you gauged people's perceptions of you when you tell them you're a dentist?
I think a lot of their perceptions center around money, and they think that you've got it made up. You're making really good money. They'll say, oh, you must be doing well. Or they'll say, oh, you're obviously quite smart, which is fair. Like dentistry, you have to be good academically. You have to be able to be a good communicator, pass exams.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's mostly like financial stuff that they make assumptions about.
It's crazy because I remember when you first told me you was a dentist, it surprised me, not from like a financial aspect, but more so because maybe it's my ignorance. You don't fit like the typical mold of what it means to be a dentist. Like the dentists that I'd encountered were not only older, significantly older, but then also, dare I say it, not as personable. And again, maybe I'm ignorant because I'm not in that field specifically, and you might have, a plethora of examples of dentists who are like young dentists who are really personable and, and charismatic. But yeah, I think that's kind of like what surprised me. Do you have something to say?
No, I think your assessment is probably accurate. Well, is it accurate? I don't know. I think because we get on, you'll probably think that. But in dental school, I felt the exact same way about a lot of my peers. I was like, we're so different.
What, they weren't as like charismatic? I'm not saying
I
they
wouldn't say they weren't as charismatic.
But
we were just very different people. So when I sat with them, I didn't get like, we didn't have like a back and forth kind of vibe, me and a lot of them.
So just to interject, did you find that you weren't quite resonating with multiple people who somehow managed to all resonate with each other?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So you kind of felt like the black sheep, like the odd one out. Interesting. Which kind of makes sense in my brain because again, like when you told me you was a dentist, I was like, oh, okay, it didn't, and especially where like again, not to judge the dental community, but especially like your sense for fashion as well, which is something that I hadn't necessarily seen from a lot of healthcare professionals in general, let alone dentists. Yeah, it definitely spun me slightly.
I don't think a lot of working class people go into dentistry. I think a lot of people in dentistry have connections to dentistry that enable them to access the things that you need to access in order to be able to even get on the course. So work experience was really, really difficult to get. And if my mum wasn't an interpreter and didn't have those connections with a particular dentist in a particular practice, that would have been off the cards. My cousin, like my mum's friends, like her close friend from childhood.
That's my cousin.
Exactly. Her close friend's childhood, her son was a doctor doing rounds on a maxillofacial unit in a hospital. So he was kind of like an older brother, kind of cousin vibe to me. And he got me some work experience, like shadowing him for a week in a max fax unit. So you have to come from a very particular background, and unless you've kind of managed to finesse your way into that, then it's going to be really hard for you to put together a personal statement. Thankfully now, I think they're phasing out personal statements for the coming year.
Nice.
So you don't have to really do as much, but you do still have to talk about the work experience that you've got. So I don't think it makes too much difference, because accessing that work experience in the first place is a very, very tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like I'm a little bit different.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit different. Just a little bit different.
But I don't think that dentists lack charisma, or I think it's just who you vibe with. And the people that I just happen to vibe with, like the people that I'd grown up around in school as a teen, my friends, none of them went on to be dentists and doctors or anything like that.
Yeah.
Very few of them did. And it always felt like you had to kind of put on a mask when you were going into that mode, because you were expected to be
a dentist.
Exactly. So there's an element of kind of faking it that you had to put on in order to put that side of your your capabilities across to the person that was interviewing you, or to the person that had that was going to essentially decide your fate. Like, are you going to get in or are you not? So yeah, I think I get what you're saying, but I think if you had come from a different background, you would probably find your dentist very charismatic, because you'd connect over more things. But in London, I could see why you would feel.
Yeah. And so you mentioned being working class. And so now, just, I guess, to touch on people's perceptions of dentists, and how much they earn. I personally will class you currently as a high earner, whatever that means, given the climate that we're in. Do you think you've retained, or perhaps in some cases lost, some of your working class values? What's so funny? Working class values as a result of you climbing up the financial ladder?
Yes. I think
naturally
I'm still very much working class. I don't know how. See, I'm not a sociologist, so I don't know. I think there's different ways that you can stratify people by class, and whether that's purely based on their income, on their upbringing, what their parents did. Like, at what point do you go from being this class to that class? If it was purely based on income, yeah, I'd probably be like middle class.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I still feel very working class. I identify as working class.
You I identify as working class.
Yeah.
So what shifts have you seen? Have you felt in yourself? So say, for example, if we are defining it just by financially, how have your financial working class views changed as a result of you now being financially middle class?
Do you know what? Financially, my views have changed in what I deem to be expensive or what I deem to be valuable. Because growing up, I would look at, say, a t-shirt, and if it was more than like, this is in Huddersfield in like 2009, 2010, like we're going to an under-18s rave.
WKD.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there was nothing to drink, to be fair, but we would have WKD before. If a top was like more than £15 at Top Man, to me, that would be expensive, because I'm working like 5-hour shifts, cash in hand at like 15 years old, for £30, and then having to spend half of that on a t-shirt to wear to this under-18s rave. And obviously, as I've got older, my views on what is affordable has changed, and I'm thinking long term, okay, how long am I going to keep this t-shirt? How long? So I find different things valuable now, and I see, I will think more long term about what I'm buying and what I'm spending on, and is it worth this much, and can I justify the expense?
Yeah. As someone who is still financially working class, having spent a lot of time around you, I've definitely kind of like seen how my own views have changed in terms of like what I deem valuable and what I'm prepared to spend on and whatnot. Because I think prior to being, I guess, having an slightly inside look into, to your life, I had a very similar view where it's kind of like, oh no, I can't possibly spend this money on this. But then you look at other things that you'd easily spend like the same amount of money on and be like, okay, well, why is it that thing I was willing to just kind of like, not even willing, unconsciously spend on, and then this one thing that I clearly want, I'm like, oh no, but I should, can I afford it, And so I think there is an element of, as you grow financially, naturally, regardless of what your class is culturally, your perceptions will change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, you become more privy to like how long things are lasting, and you start thinking about your decisions about buying clothes are not just the price anymore.
Yeah.
And not just the logo, or do I like the look of it? You'll start looking at our fabric composition, and is it well constructed? Is it going to last me a long time? Is this going to stay in my wardrobe? And you start thinking that way. And then if it's like, oh, if it's a 30, 40 pounds plain white tee that I'm going to keep for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that's going to retain its structure, it's not going to start looking a weird shape after a few tumble dries, then you can justify it. Whereas otherwise I would have been buying like a 6-pack of white t-shirts from Primark. And then do 2-3 washes
and it's gone.
Yeah,
and it's gone. And you know what really changed for me? It was the Uniqlo t-shirts. Like, as much as this is a Primark tee, because I also think having the cheap stuff is important for when you need cheap stuff, you know, like an inside t-shirt, whatever. Wear the Primark one. I don't mind if it's tattered and torn. But the Uniqlo t-shirts, I think last time I checked, they were like £20 for a white tee. An older version of myself would have been like, and even some of my peers will still look at me sideways. Some of my family will look at me sideways for spending £20 on a white tee. But it's a good white tee, and it's going to last you. And you just spent £20 on a takeaway. So
this is it.
You get me? And so again, like, I think as you grow financially, you're going to have those moments where you kind of have to check yourself, and, you know, you realize, okay, maybe my values have changed, but because today's price is not yesterday's price. You feel me? I also want to ask, do you feel like you found the security that you was looking for when you was 14 years old? When you was 14 and you was making that decision to go into dentistry, to find that security so you wouldn't be left out, so to speak, or put out rather. Do you think you found the security that 14-year-old Judy was looking for? Security,
yes. But I think you can find security in any profession,
Agreed.
in any role, if you just adjust your outgoings. So like and sometimes it's actually more security in other professions because it's fixed how much you're getting every month. Whereas in dentistry, you're self-employed. So the majority of UK dentists are self-employed people. So if a patient doesn't turn up, they don't get paid for that. And if you have a quiet month where loads of patients miss their treatment appointments, or they don't come in, your pay is going to be significantly less that month. Or you take a week off that month. Like if you take 10 days off in a month, okay, you can expect a third of your salary to be less. Your salary to be a third less, sorry.
And there isn't that kind of like, oh, annual leave. I've got annual leave, babes. Again, you're just going to go 25 days annual leave. You don't get that. Again, this is part of the misconceptions that, thankfully, you know, being part of your life, I've been able to see and kind of like change my own views on it. And when people ask me about, you know, about you being a dentist and whatnot, like, I'm able to kind of like, be like, well, maybe what you thought about this person who you perceive as a higher earner. Oh, you make this much amount a month, but are you seeing the tax? Are you seeing how much I'm being taxed? Oh yeah, but you guys but are you seeing that I don't get holiday? You know, are you seeing that when a patient who I've booked in, furthermore, a patient who's asked me to book in doesn't turn up, I don't get paid. You feel me? Like, and I think those are part of the misconceptions that people don't see. I guess just to kind of like set the record straight, how much, generally speaking, on average, is a dentist in the UK, we'll do like UK and London, expected to be paid?
Do you know what? This is the thing about dentists. I am the idiot that is such an open book. Like, I will tell everyone, and I'm like very open with it.
No one speaks about it.
You just can't get a figure out of them.
Really?
They won't say, but you can see like a job posting online, and for like a hospital placement, if you're full time, maybe you're on like 45k, 40k. But if you're in general practice, depending on your patient base, depending on whether they go for private options or they go for like standard fillings, normal fillings, and they want the NHS, I would say average, you're probably looking about 70k, 80k. But it's so variable, because you can have like a dentist that's working 5 days a week earning 120 or 100k. But most dentists don't work 5 days a week. Most dentists will do 4, because it is such a demanding profession that when I first started, I was one of the few dentists. In every practice that I went to, I was like working 5 days a week. And only recently I've dropped to 4. And then sometimes you'll get like a dentist working, 3 days in this hospital and then 2 days here and 3 days there. And they're happy to accept that in hospital, you kind of got that set salary that's coming in.
Yeah.
And then in general practice, it's kind of you're self-employed for that part of your work. So it's so variable across, not only across London, but across the UK, that it's hard to say what an average would be. But I would say around the 70, 80 mark is a good point to
which is fair. I mean, I say it's fair. Obviously, I'm not the one doing the work. I think most people will think that it's fair because all they're seeing is, it's 70k, you know, which is significantly, it's almost pretty much double what the average is in the UK. And so people are thinking that, yeah, that's a fair amount. And if anything, some people might look at it like, you're paid too much. But again, I don't think they're seeing the responsibility that you have, the lack of security that you have, the fact that you can be sued at any point, the fact that you could be sued for doing the right thing, you know, especially when it comes to like patient care and your medical background and understanding what medically is the best thing to do. And and so I guess part of this conversation is also me sharing my experiences by way of you, but then also giving you the opportunity to kind of like, I guess, clear the air on what a lot of people
I think especially when it comes to like creatives, I feel like I'm like a creative magnet. Creative people tend to gravitate towards me. Maybe they sense the creativity in me and we kind of just have like a back and forth, like a connection. But I think there's always an assumption of how stable someone else's life is without insight into that life and seeing that actually when you start pulling on a few threads, you can see that this could all fall apart very easily. So yes, dentists are in demand. They are needed. The work is extremely hard. You're always on. You're expected to manage a nurse, a patient that is awake the whole time and conscious of what you're doing. It's not like, doctors obviously work really hard as well, but I feel like with doctors, especially the ones in hospitals, you'll kind of go from a bed to a bed or, you know, check observations, have a chat with a patient about what's happening and then quickly move on to the next one. In dentistry, when you're in the middle of a procedure and that patient is like wide awake and their mouth is open and they say, my jaw's hurting now, or can we do this? I've got a little bit of a gag, can we stop? And then the next one's kind of waiting after them. And then you're managing reception and saying to them, can you tell the patient that we're this far behind? Are they happy? And the next one's kicking off like, I've got to be this, and the parking. And like so many things are happening at once that you're like, is it actually worth it? Because I was like, as an undergraduate, I used to work at an energy company. And I would see like project managers in that energy company, like sat at desks,
just walking around,
80k, 90k, like, and then as you get into like the executive office, like the chief of ops, operations managers, and or the chief financial officer for the company, and they're easily making 110, 120. And sometimes they'll have the odd late evening in a week, or they'll have to go to a few meetings, but it isn't that constant high pressure, high demand that's linked to someone's health and their well-being, or the fact that you're thinking, okay, this person could leave and be in agony and I don't know how they're going to react to that agony. So you have to kind of manage them as you go along. So then I just think people are doing quite well without all of this stress. But I think everything's going to have its pros and cons, and I have to take that into account.
I think most career paths, you kind of want it to, as you increase, you go through that kind of like that middle management point where it's really tough and you're really trying to manage everything because you're not at the bottom where you don't have responsibility, but you're not at the top where you can sit back. Ideally, you kind of want a career path that as you increase and as you grow financially, you're able to kind of like let go even more. Ideally. So like, what would that look like from a dentist perspective?
Well, I think that's a complete myth.
Really?
I don't think you'll ever let go.
Well, I don't mean, but when I say let go, it's like going back to like the project management where you're not on the ground, you know, managing people's expectations anymore. You're facilitating and making sure that the people beneath you are doing the managing of the expectations, you know. And yes, there's still responsibility on you, but your hands aren't really getting as dirty, you know, as it seems like to me in dentistry. Even though you've climbed so high financially, you're still getting your hands dirty and you still got a responsibility. You're still having to manage the people's expectations, you know, whereas in other career paths, I don't think that's necessarily the case.
Do you know what? When you say getting your hands dirty, I don't think that's the stressful part of dentistry at all. Like, I love being in the mouth, crafting that filling, making it look beautiful, changing someone's smile, really taking my time to create that beautiful smile. And then someone sits up and they're like, oh my God, I've been so insecure about that. It's been bothering me all week. And now I really like how it looks. Like, that is the best part of the job. So that's not me getting my hands dirty. The getting your hands dirty is the management of people. Which is why I say that the higher you climb and the more people you have to manage, that is getting your hands dirty. Like that is, to me, is stress.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, I've set my expectations for this safe. Okay, I've asked the practice manager to do this safe, because the next step in a dentist journey, if they were to go past being just a regular dentist like that works in a practice, is to be the practice owner maybe.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
to be a practice owner. That's the usual kind of progression. And then once you own that practice, that's when the hard work starts.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, okay, it's not just me being good at making a nice filling that feels comfortable for the patient. They leave happy days, on to the next one, and I can get stuck into the next case. It's like, okay, I've had a really uncomfortable conversation with my practice manager this morning because this wasn't done. We've got this check coming, and the Care Quality Commission is going to come in and do an inspection on us, or the NHS has asked why we're doing this and not that. And I need her to have these reports ready. She's managing a lot of other things, and I've asked her to do this, but she hasn't done this. And now I need to have a conversation about keeping her on side, but also making sure that things are getting done.
Yeah.
I've then got a nurse that's calling in sick nonstop. How am I going to manage that within, the scope of employment law? And then you're expected to be clued upon HR, and a lot more like that is the difficult part of it.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the further you climb, there's this false perception that the people at the top aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
Like they're just kind of feet up, just overlooking things. No, they're doing all the stuff that you don't want to do.
And that's why you get paid for it. That's where the money's at.
Exactly.
So what would you say is in your personal opinion, what would you say is a comfortable salary to live in London comfortably?
I don't want to ruffle any feathers.
Ruffle them.
See, this is very subjective.
Of course, comfort is subjective.
Exactly.
Of course.
Your comfortable and my comfortable is so different. I have come from a really nice house in Syria.
Yes.
Yeah, my parents were both professionals,
Yes.
2 professionals, 3 kids, marble floors. And that was, 1990s Syria, where if you're a professional, you expect a certain quality of life. So me thinking in the UK that I would have a certain quality of life as a dentist, that would be my level of comfort.
Yeah.
Do I need that? No, but for me to be comfortable, I would expect that.
Yeah.
Based on the years that I've put in to get to where I am.
Absolutely.
And the amount of student loan and the hours that I've put in and the weeks of holiday that I've not taken, and all of these things, my expectation for my own comfort is a lot higher. So with that preface, I would say for me, anything under 175, I can't see and that's in today's current economic climate.
In January 2025.
175.
Yeah.
When you take into account that after 100 you start losing your personal allowance, it's pretty much 50% tax at that point.
Yeah.
Unless you've got like a limited company and then you're kind of managing your tax in different ways, or you're leaving things in the company and you're saving up to buy a practice. But there's always like, what is comfort? It's actually being able to spend that money to go out for that nice meal, to buy that nice item.
Yeah.
So even then it's like, okay, but if I've structured it as a limited company and the money has to stay in there, what comfort do I have? Do you know what I mean?
You've got the money, but you haven't got the freedom to spend it the way you want to spend it, which is giving you the comfort that.
You know what I mean? It's like, so okay, I can keep the money in the limited company, but not spend any of it. But then it's like, okay, so where are we going with this? Yeah, I think 175, and then with that, I would be able to go on like 3-4 holidays a year, buy a nice item a couple times a month, have a reasonable space for me to live in with myself. And say a partner, and maybe if I wanted to have a family, then a child in the future.
Yeah.
But in London, to do that, it's so expensive. Like the prices are wild. So it's like, I think 175. I could live out of London for significantly less and have that level of comfort as well. But I think in London, that's
like your personal
goal.
Yeah, fair. And so what do you think is the biggest misconception about earning 6 figures?
Is that all of a sudden all your problems are going to be gone?
You still got problems?
Yeah.
Oh. And I guess I asked that because I think especially a lot of the rhetoric I'm seeing online is that people, especially people who come from working class backgrounds, see the 6-figure mark as almost like this, that's the goal, that's where we need to get to. And, once you get there,
Once you get there, HMRC again.
They'll be there with you like, hey, you're right there, babes. I guess not to answer the question for you, but my biggest misconception about it was, it's the tax system. You feel me? Everyone thinks, okay, yeah, once I'm earning six figures, then da-da-da-da. From what I've seen, that tax, HMRC.
Yeah.
That's the biggest misconception, in my opinion. But yeah, sorry.
I think it is that. It's the tax and a lot of the outgoings.
Yeah.
So anything that's linked to dentistry costs significantly more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going on a dental course, like you've seen this year, I did a postgraduate diploma for 1 year, or like that cost 17 grand.
It's a lot.
It is a lot, but the materials are expensive. But yeah, so once you get to that 100K mark, you pay the tax off. If you want to upskill and, train, do something you want to learn, 17 grand off again. And then obviously rent in London, cost of living, of food. And if you want to go I might sound entitled, but I don't think it's crazy for a young professional to want to go out a couple of times a month and have a few takeaways a week.
Absolutely not.
Like, I don't think that is an unreasonable request.
No.
But people will say, oh, but the normal person doesn't get to do that. Or, of course you have to budget and this and that. And it's like, yeah, even with all that budgeting, the money is still going.
Yeah. And did the normal person spend 5 years in uni studying? And we're not talking studying.
And sometimes they do, to be fair.
Sometimes, but again, I guess this is part of like my views on it changing by virtue of being close to you. There is a lot of the arguments made against how much dentists earn, or high earners, so to speak, has always been like, well, the normal person. Yeah, well, the normal person didn't do what I did. The normal person, again, doesn't have to worry about being sued. The normal person doesn't. The normal person gets 25 days annual leave. You get me? Whereas I have to book my birthday off. So it's like, yeah, again, I don't know if I necessarily agree with the entitlement of the normal person, because the normal person hasn't put in the work to, and I also imagine that once you've put in that level of work, it's only right that you should be able to feel like you can spend money on free takeaways a week if that's what you want. If you want to go out to a nice meal, if you want to spend X amount on this item of clothing, you should be able to. Because otherwise, what's the point? I might as well go be a normal person and not have to worry about any of this. But instead, I've taken the difficult route. I've done what I need to do. I've got what I've got, and so I've earned this.
Yeah, that. A lot of it is how I feel, and then I have to look at I do have this conversation with myself regularly about like, okay, I have earned this treat, or I've earned that, and then I have to think, okay, but why wouldn't the normal person, quote unquote normal person, do that? And I always think back to my own privileges growing up, of the environment that I grew up in, and the mum that I had that pushed me to study, and it is a privilege to be a dentist. Like, I'm very lucky to be able to even have the capacity to study the way that I did, to be encouraged down a path that has made this a reality for me, that a lot of people weren't supported in the same way that I was. But yeah, if you want to go and be a dentist and have, this level of the thing is, you don't need to be a dentist to make this much money.
Yeah.
You don't need
ways.
like the years that you give to exams, and like, you don't even get like a normal student existence. In our first few lectures at dental school, they were like, you can't think of yourself as a normal student. Like, in your first 2 years, you can't consider, my mates that are studying theatre with in halls, they might want to go out in the middle of the week and go to this freshers event. You've got reading to do at that library because your first set of exams is coming up at the end of December.
This is first year?
Yeah, first
year.
With like... Yeah. There was January exams, sorry. It wasn't end of December. January exams. So
still, that's like 3 months in, 4 months in.
Yep.
Ooh.
Open this book. I hope you understand it. If you want to email us if you don't understand anything. But there's no kind of like spoon feeding.
Yeah.
And you see other people just kind of get on with it. And I had undiagnosed ADHD as well. So I'm looking around like, how are all these people just picking up this content so quick? So I think if you want to be a dentist, go do it. Go do it.
Take it.
This country needs dentists. Go do it. But I think if you're doing it for financial reasons, there are other ways to make money. If you're doing it for stability, yeah, you'll have stability while the country needs dentists, but things change all the time. Nothing is set in stone. In April, they're going to have a new plan for the NHS. They may recruit loads of dentists from abroad that are going to make up that skills shortage. And at that point, it's not going to be as in demand.
Yeah.
Like a few years ago, we're like, oh yeah, going to tech. And now we're seeing all the tech layoffs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just I think find stability in what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm. And so when do you feel like you have enough, or like what is enough for you outside of the figure that you specifically mentioned, which obviously can vary whether you're in London, outside of London, you know, what your needs are. What does enough look like for you?
To me, enough is one property that I own,
Mm-hmm.
a car that I own that can get me from A to B.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't need to be like a Rolls Royce or anything like that. But a comfortable car that isn't breaking down on me. 2 bedrooms in a house or a flat. Some outdoor space. A spacious living room. A nice clean kitchen that doesn't have problems. A nice bathroom.
Mm.
So all of these things, it's not like I'm expecting some crazy quality of life that is unattainable.
Mm.
It's just where I want to be and where I feel safest. It is expensive.
Yeah.
If I wasn't gay, I would not be in London.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe that.
Where would you be?
Up north.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, I feel like up north, I don't feel as comfortable because there isn't as big a gay community and there isn't that level of acceptance as there is in London.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like you're going to get that small town mindset up north, which I feel like in London you don't get, or you get it less frequently.
Yeah. But then I also think that like what you're expected to expect in London is significantly smaller than what I believe we deserve, because having grown up in London in the 90s, yes, it was your 2 bedrooms and your garden. Like that, why would I not have 2 bedrooms and a garden? Whereas now, especially over the past like 7 years, like especially since Brexit, but then I mean since 2008, and then obviously like everything that's happened in the past 15 years has really like knuckled down that like you are going to have a 1-bedroom flat, ideally near a station if you're lucky, and again, if you're lucky, or you're going to be flat sharing with 6 random strangers, you know? And so, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect your 2 bedrooms and a garden. It just means that, as I'm sure you're experiencing now, that you're having to weigh up, like, what is this worth? You know, is it worth trying to get this 2 bedrooms and a garden in London? Or is it worth moving on the outskirts of London? Is it worth saying F you to the UK in general and going somewhere completely different, you know? But yeah, I guess that's for you to decide. What does success look like for you?
I don't know.
Really?
I think success to me would look like I Was Here by Beyonce. When I leave this world, I'll leave no regrets, leave something to remember so they won't forget I was here.
I love that. But what does that look like for you?
For me,
because I know what it looks like for Beyonce.
It means...
What's the thing you're leaving behind that people can look at?
I want to change things in a very drastic way. I want to improve the quality of people's lives. I want to be able to look back and say, yeah, my time on this, like my short stint on this planet meant something. And I think it could be through healthcare. I think it could be through providing people with things they don't have access to. But I'm also very aware of the capitalist landscape that we live in, and how in order to achieve a lot of the things that make you successful, you need money to do that. And so it's about kind of having a strategy and getting yourself to that place in order to be able to help people, but doing it within the system in which you exist.
Yeah. And I have one final question, and it's a question I ask every single person on this podcast. And that question is, what is the one thing you want the world to know about you? If you can go to the top of a mountain and scream one thing outside of I was here, what would it be?
To know about me?
What's the one thing you want the world to know about you?
You don't need to know anything about me. Mind your business. Yeah, honestly, I don't care if the world knows me or not. What I care about, I want the world to know about my roots, about where I come from, about the plight of Kurdish people. I want people to know about the inequality that exists within the world. I want people to be aware of their privileges. You don't need to know anything about me. Just look at yourself and reflect on yourself. Is more than enough.
You killed me because literally 5 seconds ago, I said, what does success look like? He was like, I want people to know that I was here. And I'm asking you, what do you want the world to know about you? Like, don't know nothing about me.
You know, as in, I want to leave my footprint on the planet through the acts, like through acts rather than through a name.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he was so this and he. It's not for my name to live on. It's for what I did to live on. Yeah. So it's not necessarily knowing anything about me personally.
But more so what you did.
Exactly.
Love that.
Yeah. I don't think you need to, like, my personal life isn't particularly interesting.
That's a lie. That's a lie. And social media will say otherwise.
I think there are bigger things to know than my individual experiences and my circumstances. I just want everyone to be clued up to the same level.
Yeah. I hear that. Dr. Shaikho, otherwise known as Judy, thank you for joining me today. It has been an actual pleasure. I don't think I've had a conversation like this with you. It's been very informative for me. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have, thank you.
And yeah, I will see you in about 5 seconds when this camera rolls off. I'll see you in about 5 seconds when we get out of here and, should get some food.
Yeah, let's go
get some food. And thank you for watching TashTalk. Make sure you subscribe because I got to pay my rent.